when you make a mistake is when you choose to shame yourself or ruminate on it. So to me, a lot of things that we identify as failures are just precursors. And it's really how we respond after something happens that can create that fail. Welcome to the Be Your Own Life Coach podcast, where you master your mind and coach your own comeback. You are the hero, you are the guide, and you will learn to architect your life from the inside. I'm your host, Britannia Stowe, joined by my sister and co-host, Annika Wilder. Enjoy the show.
So, Britannia, I've been thinking so much about failure recently, and I just had this thought as I was meditating on it about the difference between failure, because I think you and I agree that not all failure is bad, but it dawned on me that, and we might even argue that failure isn't bad at all, but I'm curious your thoughts. The two things that came to my mind, kind of separating different kinds of failure, is failure by commission versus failure by omission. Have you ever heard of like separating it like that?
I love that you broke it down like that, Annika. I have never thought to break it down that specifically, but yes, absolutely. There is a difference between failure by commission, something that you're doing that causes you to fail, versus failure by omission, which is omitting the thing that you should be doing. So the thing that you're not doing that causes failure. Absolutely. We could totally go into what defines both of those a little bit deeper.
Yeah, so I was curious, what would you say if we were to say that this was true, you could have failure by commission and failure by omission, and we focused on commission first. What are some things that people do that would be considered failure by commission?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I think this one is so easy. Over scheduling, over booking, right? Filling our schedules too far, micromanaging, controlling way too much. I would even say ignoring red flags. So even though it's an ignore, it's an omission, but it's still an action because you're ignoring something actively. I would say lying. Lying would be a big one that I think causes a lot of failure as well.
Yeah, why is lying a failure? Because what if like you were really sick and you're like, how do I look? And I said, oh, you look great. Like why is lying a failure?
Well, just so you know, if I am ever sick and I'm asking how I look, that is a cry for help, and you better tell me I look good.
Right. So is all lying bad?
Oh, that's, I think, for another podcast, is all lying bad. I would say that when it comes to lying, it isn't just about what you're saying to another person, it's what you're saying to yourself. When you lie, you're saying that the truth doesn't matter. When you're lying, you're saying that you don't have the courage to speak the truth, or you're afraid of being judged for saying the truth, or that their truth is more important than your truth, and how they react to what actually happened. And the truth is more important than what actually happened. And so I think we often, when it comes to lying, we avoid uncomfortable situations because they're uncomfortable. And lying is a disservice. You won't get to the bottom of an issue if you're lying. So definitely that's a big one that I think we should definitely dive into on another episode.
Okay. And I mean, speaking of, I think you mentioned the word mistake. So some people use mistake and failure synonymously. So what is the difference between an actual failure and a mistake?
Yeah, I think we classify a lot of things as failures. And I think we misidentify a lot of things in our lives as failures. A mistake is not a failure, an accident is not a failure. If you accidentally, step on your dog when he's walking by, are you a horrible parent? Are you a horrible dog owner? Or do you fail as a dog mom? No, it was a mistake. You stepped on his paw, which I do and I did today. And it happens. And beating yourself up over something that's small is, to me, not a failure. The failure when you make a mistake is when you choose to shame yourself or ruminate on it. So to me, a lot of things that we identify as failures are just precursors. And it's really how we respond after something happens that can create that fail.
Okay, so because I was going to ask about intentions, but which is like a precursor to commission failure, but you're kind of saying failure is defined off of the way that you're responding to whatever
Yes.
it is.
Yes, absolutely. So I would say, you mentioned mistake. Another one would be trying something, experimentation. If you have never uh, ice skated before and you decide you're going to go ice skating, it would be a fun activity to do with your significant other or friends. And you get your shoes and you get on the ice and you fall immediately down on your bum and you get back up and you try again and you fall again. Are you failing? Are you failing every time you fall? No, because you decided to get back up. So to me, when you're learning something, when you're experimenting, when you're trying something out, and we should all look at life as a scientist and we should be curious and experiment a lot more. But when you decide to get back up, you have not failed. It is when you choose to stay down on the ice. Why would you do that? Your bum's going to get cold and you're going to
Yeah.
start pouting. But if you decide, you know what, this is too hard and I'm just going to quit, to me, that is the fail. It isn't the actual falling down, it's the refusing to get back up.
I love that. So it's intentional, but it's also the way that you're responding because failure, I mean, I think it George Clooney or I can't remember. I saw a clip recently of some famous movie star and he said that you don't ever learn from success and that you learn from failure. And
Mm-hmm.
so the way we respond from our quote unquote failures is what actually determines the failure. But if we get up and we learn from it, then it's not actually a failure. So I guess my question is, what is actual failure?
Yeah. Actual failures. To me, I have a hard time really defining this because it goes back to how I believe respond. So we can either say that anything that did not turn out the way you expected could be a fail. We could say mistakes are failures, missteps, experimentation, anything like that. I think we could classify as a failure. But if we do that, that means we need to take out the personalization and the trauma that we back the term failure with. So I could go either way. Either everything is a failure and we need to not hold ourselves so personally attached to the outcome, or nothing is a failure. It's how you choose to respond and react after an event that becomes a failure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So what if so then what you're saying is like if I had all the intention to like you mentioned experimentation. So if I'm going to experiment with a new method of I don't know, marketing and I want to market my business in a different way and I'm experimenting and it falls flat and it's horrible. But the intention was that I would succeed or was the intention that I would experiment to see what would happen? You know what I'm saying? Like, is it so you said experimentation's not failure, but the intention was to succeed, but it didn't work. It failed. So there is an actual, like, logically, let's say I put a new ad out on Facebook or something and it failed. That's an actual failure. Wouldn't you agree or no?
Yes. I mean, in that case, you're absolutely right. It would be a failure in that snapshot of time. If we're only looking at the ad and its performance, then yes, the performance failed to meet our expectations. Maybe we lost money, no leads came in. And so, yes, that was a failure in that very small micro perception. But in a more macro lens, you can look at it as you've just learned a way to not market your business. So then you got to dig in deeper. Again, be that scientist. When you experiment, you don't get the right answer right away. In fact, you should kind of expect that it might work out or it might not. So if you're posting an ad and you have these unrealistic expectations that it's going to bring in 10,000 new leads and it's going to crush the first time you're ever putting out an ad, well, you've kind of set yourself up to fail in that way. And so being able to go in and say, hey, I'm going to put this up with good intentions that it's going to be successful. I'm paying the money. And if it doesn't come through, I will need to find out why it did not work out and how can I learn from that. So this becomes one more way not to spend my money, one more way not to market my business, and I can learn how to actually market my business better.
Okay. Which I totally agree with. It also kind of sounds like you don't believe in the such thing as failure, that you can frame the world as there is no failure.
Yeah, you know what? I was thinking a lot about this recently, and I don't know if I've done a great disservice to myself. I've learned to reframe, and that's something that I would love to get into more detail with you, is how to coach yourself so that you don't feel like a failure all the time.
Yeah.
And I have learned to, and this is part of my journey, is I used to feel like a failure and everything I did was wrong. And I felt like the world had conspired against me. And I just failed left and right. I couldn't do anything right. And now I have done such a great job of being a student of myself and encourage others to be a student of themselves, that I reframe every experience as an opportunity to learn, to be better, to evolve, to reflect. So the next time I'm faced with an opportunity, I know how to be just 1% better.
I love that. And I know you've been through a lot. And I think like your whole who you are and what you've gone through is you've faced it, you've felt it, and then you reframed it. Mm-hmm. And so if someone were to coach themselves like you coached yourself through your life and the hardships that you've been through, what are some steps that someone can do to move out of the mindset of like, oh my gosh, I am a failure, to I failed and it's okay? Like, how can we reframe and get them out of that mindset?
Yeah, I love this. So whenever you're not listening to this, when you have a moment, ask yourself, what are you beating yourself up about, right? Start there. And it could just be bringing awareness to a repetitive thought. Sometimes we don't even realize that we are in a shame cycle and thinking about something over and over. So just bring some awareness to your thoughts. Like, what thought is coming up? And if there isn't a particular thought, or maybe you find it right away, you go, oh, well, I was teaching yoga and I totally messed up my sequence. Not only did I mess up my sequence, but my yoga student in the middle of class called out that I messed up my sequence. And now I feel like I'm incompetent as a yoga teacher and I can never teach yoga again or never show my face in that studio again, right? So take yourself to whatever that event is that you're replaying in your head and the thoughts that are coming with it, right? If we listen to what I just said, I made a mistake in yoga class, but now I can never teach again. If you say it out loud, doesn't it sound kind of silly? Mm-hmm. You made a mistake and now you're a failure. So just bringing that awareness, first of all, and then asking yourself some questions like, well, was your intention to mislead the class? Do you normally show up for your class? Do you normally offer a really great class? So is this out of character for you? So if it's out of character, was it a mistake? Was it an accident? Is it something, especially when you ask yourself, is it out of character? I think that's really important, because when we fail and we misstep, we can often identify with the failure or the mistake. And so let's separate that identity a little bit. and rebuild what your identity actually is you're a fantastic yoga teacher and you hold space for so many people. And if out of 100 classes you made a mistake and were called out in front of your class, does that make you a bad teacher? Does that make you a failure? No. So then the next question is, well, how did you respond? And I like the word respond versus react, because that is, again, how we choose to respond, I think, is where the fail comes from. And so, did we start crying in the middle of class? Were we so embarrassed that we walked out? Did we laugh it off? Did we thank the student for helping you stay on track? If you did not respond in the way that you wish you had, then take a moment and visualize that scenario again. And how would you like to have responded? If you started crying and got all embarrassed, then maybe you would have liked to laugh it off and thank the student and carried on. Allow yourself to reflect on that. So then the next time you're faced with an opportunity for a misstep or a failure, you're able to go, oh, wait, I remember I didn't like the way I responded last time. Let me maybe try something different.
Yeah, I love that. The little simple changes of using a different word, I think, is huge, because the word failure sounds like a scary word. But if we change it from failure to mistake, a mistake sounds like, well, we didn't mean to fail. I don't think anyone purposely fails unless there's strategic failures, which we could talk about that. But most of the time, I think people want to succeed. So really, if they change it from failure to mistake, it digests a little bit better. And then if they detach it from their identity, instead of saying like, I made a mistake, what did I learn from it? How can I be better? How does this make me better? Instead of I am a failure, is what you're saying is how you would coach yourself out of it. But my question is, sometimes I like to go to the extreme to kind of drive in a point. Okay. So what if I cheated on my spouse? To me, in my opinion, my belief, that would be a failure by commission. That would be something that I did that was like a heinous act. That was a bad decision and a failure to my marriage. And whether it was intentional or I stumbled upon it, I don't know. But let's just say I cheated on my spouse and I feel so guilty about it. I am so depressed about it. What would I do? How could I coach myself to get out of this heavy depression? If somebody, like, if that happened, what could I do to coach myself to reframe that, when that is a big failure by commission?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's a very deep question. So I'm grateful that you presented that. So we talk about little missteps all the time, but something big like cheating on your husband. I think that one of the first things that you need to face is acknowledging that you did the thing. I think often we don't take responsibility or accountability, and we go, well, he was ignoring me, or I thought he was cheating on me, or we don't really love each other anymore. And so finding some accountability, because if you don't take accountability, if you give your power away to someone else, then you don't have the power to change yourself. You don't have the ability when you don't take accountability. So I think it's really important to start there. So once you've taken accountability that, yes, I cheated on my husband, I did this thing, but I feel awful about it, then starting to ask yourself why you did it, what led to you cheating on your husband. Just start asking yourself some questions. What if anything would have kept you from cheating on your husband? And you want to be careful with that, because you don't want to go through this regret, spiral too far. But also we need to sit with some uncomfortable feelings. What led to it? What steps, at what point, from step 1 to 10, could I have pivoted and maybe not had built a close emotional relationship with this man, and maybe not been alone in this man's house, or maybe not given my phone number to this man, or maybe should have wore my wedding ring that day, or what, look through the steps. And again, it's not to shame yourself, it's to acknowledge what led to it. And I think it's really important that you acknowledge what led to that failure, but also kind of detach from it to get to the facts. And I think that we often get so caught in the feels that we go through this guilt and this shame. But if we look through a lens of curiosity, and, when you coach yourself, you're actually coaching a version of yourself. So maybe the version of Annika that has cheated on her husband in the past and feels really bad about it can coach this new version of Annika who just cheated on her husband and doesn't know how to process it. And so being able to step in these different roles so that you can help make sense of why you did the thing that you did. With such a heavy topic like that, I wonder if it would be helpful that you do seek some outside help. I don't think that every moment is something that you need to coach yourself always alone. I would also encourage you to ask, do I need help? Right? That's part of the process. Do I need to see a counselor? Do I need to see a therapist? Do I need to talk to a friend? Do I need to talk to my husband? So that's some of my thoughts that come up with that.
Yeah. And something that you're really big on is also forgiveness. And so I know we'll have a whole podcast on, or a whole episode or a whole series on forgiveness, but it's something that came to my mind that yes, you need to take accountability. Yes, you need to self-reflect, and to go beyond the self-reflection, that person who's coaching themselves probably also needs to figure out, like you said, what caused them to do that in the first place. Like, are they lacking a certain kind of love, and do they need to figure out how to communicate what they need? Because a lot of people who cheat or who are unfaithful in some ways is that they are seeking the love that they need somewhere else, right? Because they're either unable to speak up or for whatever reason. And so maybe the action item there is, let's self-reflect and think about, well, what love do you need? And why did you seek it over there? And how can that be repaired? And the repairing comes from forgiveness, because you can't go back and change what you did. You can reframe it as a learning experience and learn about yourself and learn about how that experience taught me that I need this kind of love. And I didn't realize I wasn't getting it. I wasn't being honest with myself or whatever it is, but you can't actually change the act. And so there has to come to a point where you can delay your forgiveness and you can sit in your sorrow for as long as you want, hindering your future success, hindering your future relationships and connections with people, or you can take accountability, learn from it, move on, and forgive yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's what's going to set you free, right?
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up. That is the aftercare. Forgiveness, a lot of people get caught up in that, well, if I forgive this person, then I am saying what they did is okay. And you're right. We'll have to go really deep into forgiveness because that is a whole topic in itself. But having forgiveness is not for anyone else but yourself. And anyone who has failed, made a huge mistake, and had to overcome that mistake understands the power of failure and the power of forgiveness that comes after that. It's a crucial part of the circle. And I don't think you can ever truly move on if you don't forgive. And that's one of the things that we'll have to talk about in another episode, is if you are still feeling reactive or some kind of way when you think about, I cheated on my husband, then there's probably still some forgiveness that needs to take place there.
Yeah, I love that. This is so good. And it really filled me with the questions that I had. And I have this quote that I think you're going to love because it's by Winston Churchill. And he said, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts."
This has been another episode of the Be Your Own Life Coach podcast. If you found value in today's conversation, subscribe and share the love. And remember the teachings of Lao Tzu. When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. Until next time, trust yourself. Take the wisdom, take the breath, and take the next step.